He walked into the grand ballroom dressed in a crisp black suit, the kind that speaks of quiet confidence. Cameras flashed, champagne glasses clinked, and laughter echoed under crystal chandeliers. But before he could take a single step inside, a firm hand gripped his arm. The security guard's voice was cold, his eyes suspicious. Guests turned to stare. In that single moment, every sound in the room faded, leaving only the weight of humiliation pressing down on him. He wasn't a waiter. He wasn't lost. He wasn't even supposed to be questioned. Yet there he stood, frozen, surrounded, and silently judged for something he could never change. What the guard didn't know was that this man wasn't just another guest trying to sneak in. He was the reason the entire gala existed that night, the very person being honored. A mistake that would expose far more than ignorance. It would reveal the painful truth about how far we still have to go, because sometimes respect is given to the uniform, not the person wearing it. And when the truth finally came out, the entire room would never forget his face again. Malcolm Hayes was used to being the only black man in the room. Board meetings, charity galas, award dinners, he'd learned to walk through polished halls with his head high, carrying both grace and the invisible weight of perception. To the world, he was a symbol of success, a self-made architect whose designs had reshaped skylines and communities alike. But beneath the accolades, Malcolm carried memories that never left him. Growing up, he'd watched his mother clean offices just like the ones where his name now hung on the door. Every success, every handshake, every invitation to the exclusive events came with a quiet reminder: you've earned your place, but you'll always have to prove it. That night, the city buzzed with celebration. A charity gala was being held in his honor, recognizing his contributions to urban renewal and youth mentorship. Reporters would be there. So would investors, politicians, and celebrities. For once, Malcolm wasn't the guest in the background. He was the centerpiece, the man of the hour. He'd rehearsed his speech in the car, calm and collected. But as the valet took his keys and the golden doors of the ballroom came into view, a subtle unease crept in. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe it was that familiar feeling, the one that told him that even success didn't always shield you from suspicion. He brushed it off, straightened his tie, and stepped toward the entrance. Inside, laughter spilled out in waves. Spotlights reflected off polished marble floors. It was the kind of night meant to celebrate progress, diversity, and hope. But standing just beyond those doors was a man who didn't see any of that. A man whose job was to protect the event, but whose judgment was about to expose something far more dangerous than any security threat. Because in a few short seconds, the story everyone came to celebrate would turn into a lesson the world still needed to learn. The air outside the ballroom felt colder than it should have. Malcolm stood for a moment, taking in the elegant scene through the glass doors, the clinking of crystal, the shimmer of gowns, the quiet rhythm of a string quartet. He could almost see his name on the banner inside, framed in gold. Honoring Malcolm Hayes, a vision for tomorrow. He took a breath and stepped forward. But before he could reach the carpeted entryway, a tall figure in a dark suit moved into his path. The security guard's stance was rigid, hand raised slightly as if stopping traffic. "Sir, this event is for invited guests only," the guard said sharply, his tone clipped with authority. Malcolm blinked, momentarily confused. He reached into his pocket for the embossed invitation that had been sent to him personally by the foundation director. But before he could even pull it out, the guard's expression hardened. "I'm going to have to ask you to step back." A few guests turned their heads. Whispered glances rippled through the doorway like wind through dry leaves. Malcolm's mind raced. He'd been stopped before, in hotels, in stores, at airports, but never here, never at an event honoring him. His instinct told him to stay calm, to not give them a reason to make it worse. But inside, something heavy twisted in his chest. He managed a polite nod, steady voice. "I'm actually—" The guard interrupted, scanning him from head to toe. "We've had some issues with staff trying to come in through the main entrance," he said. "Service doors are around the back." The words landed like stones. Staff. Service doors. He glanced down at his suit, freshly pressed, his polished shoes, the award pin on his lapel. He looked like every other guest, except one thing. The silence between them thickened. Another guard approached, radio in hand, curious. "Everything okay?" "Just making sure this gentleman knows where he's supposed to be," the first one replied. Malcolm felt the weight of the stairs behind him now. Women in sequined dresses, men with cocktails paused halfway to their lips. They didn't say a word. They didn't need to. The look in their eyes said enough. For a fleeting moment, he thought about walking away, letting it go. But something deep inside refused. Not this time. He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out the invitation, handing it to the guard with measured calm. The guard took it, glanced at it, and then at Malcolm again, as if the words on the card couldn't possibly be true. Malcolm Hayes, the guard muttered under his breath. He hesitated. Then, almost reluctantly, he checked his tablet, typing the name into the guest list. The result flashed instantly. VIP, guest of honor. The color drained from his face. Before he could speak, the event organizer, a woman in a silver gown, appeared by the doorway. Her eyes widened as she saw Malcolm standing there. "Oh my God, Mr. Hayes!" she exclaimed, rushing forward. "We've been waiting for you. Why are you still outside?" The guard took a small step back, fumbling for words. But Malcolm didn't say anything. The organizer ushered him in quickly, her voice bright and apologetic, trying to patch over the awkwardness that now filled the air like static. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. Every eye followed him, not with admiration, but with the kind of uneasy guilt people feel when they've just witnessed something wrong and hope it will quietly disappear. Malcolm smiled politely, shook hands, thanked people who avoided his gaze. But inside, his thoughts were miles away. The applause during his introduction later that evening sounded hollow. Each clink of a glass felt sharp, brittle. He wondered how many others had stood in that same spot, facing that same quiet humiliation, and had no one to step in. How many times protocol had been used as a shield for prejudice. During dinner, the guard stayed near the entrance, glancing occasionally in Malcolm's direction, his posture still tense, his eyes uncertain. It wasn't guilt exactly, it was realization, the kind that comes too late to matter. But Malcolm didn't want anger to define the night. He'd spent years fighting for spaces that included people like him, not to divide, but to open doors. Still, the sting lingered. Every smile he gave, every toast raised in his honor, was a mask over the ache of what had just happened. Later, as the host began to speak about breaking barriers and celebrating diversity, Malcolm felt the irony press against his chest. He glanced at the crowd, people applauding words they didn't fully understand, because breaking barriers wasn't about speeches or galas. It was about moments like the one he'd just endured, moments that no one wanted to talk about, but everyone silently recognized. The night carried on. Photos were taken, awards handed out, polite laughter filled the air. But beneath the glitter and grace, the unspoken truth hung heavy. Progress on paper didn't always mean progress in hearts. Malcolm's acceptance speech was coming next. And as he rose from his chair, applause building around him, he made a quiet decision. He wouldn't let the moment be about the award or the mistake that preceded it. He would make it about something bigger. The room would listen. And this time, they would hear him, not just as a name on a banner, but as a man who had lived the truth they were all too afraid to face. The applause faded as Malcolm stepped to the podium. 1,000 faces stared back. Some smiling, others curious, a few still carrying the awkward remnants of what had happened at the door. The stage lights felt hotter than they should, burning against his skin. He gripped the edge of the podium, steadying his breath. In front of him sat the guard who had stopped him earlier. Their eyes met for a brief, charged second. The man looked down immediately, unable to hold the gaze. Malcolm began to speak. His prepared speech about architecture, community, and hope was neatly folded in his jacket pocket, but he didn't reach for it. Instead, he looked out over the glittering crowd and spoke from the ache still pulsing in his chest. He told them about the moment he'd walked in, about being stopped, questioned, and directed to the service entrance at his own celebration. A soft murmur spread through the room. Glasses stilled. No one moved. He didn't name the guard. He didn't have to. The silence that filled the ballroom was confession enough. His voice trembled, not from anger, but from the weight of truth. "I've spent my life designing buildings that bring people together," he said, his tone calm but unyielding. "Spaces meant to unite, not divide. But even tonight, even here, I was reminded that walls still exist, just not the kind made of concrete." A woman near the front lowered her head. The host shifted uncomfortably. The words hung in the air, cutting through the gloss of the evening like glass. He spoke of what it felt like to carry success in one hand and prejudice in the other. How even the highest achievements couldn't always dismantle the quiet assumptions that followed him. And as he spoke, something in the room began began to change. Faces softened. Some eyes filled with shame, others with realization. The security guard stood in the back now, his expression unreadable, but his posture no longer rigid. He looked like a man seeing the world through new eyes, just beginning to understand the wound he had reopened. Malcolm's voice rose slightly, steady, powerful. "The real test of progress," he said, "isn't how far we've come, but how we treat each other when no one's watching." The audience sat frozen. Every word echoed in the stillness, a mirror reflecting truths too long ignored. The moment stretched, raw, uncomfortable, unforgettable, and then, as if on cue, a single pair of hands began to clap. Slowly, others joined. The sound built, filling the room, rising like a wave, not of celebration, but of reckoning. Malcolm stepped back, eyes glistening, the applause washing over him. Like a storm he'd waited his whole life to weather. He'd come to be honored, but he had ended up exposing the truth hidden behind the evening's polished perfection. The gala was supposed to celebrate progress. Instead, it became a moment that demanded it. And as the final round of applause faded into silence, one question lingered, one that none of them could escape. Would they remember his award, or the truth he made them face? When the applause finally faded, Malcolm stepped away from the podium. His heart still pounded, but not from nerves, from release. For the first time in his career, he hadn't hidden behind composure or politeness. He had spoken the truth, raw and unfiltered. The crowd rose for a standing ovation, but it wasn't the kind that followed a well-rehearsed speech. It was the sound of realization, of people seeing something they had never truly seen before. The foundation director approached him afterward, eyes glistening, whispering an apology that couldn't quite undo the harm. The guard lingered by the exit, waiting. When their eyes met, Malcolm paused. The man stepped forward slowly, his voice barely a whisper. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't mean to offend. He said he was just doing his job. Malcolm nodded gently, not with anger, but with understanding. "I know," he said quietly. "But that's the problem, isn't it? We've gotten used to calling it just a job." The guard's face tightened, the truth sinking in deeper than any reprimand could. For the first time, he didn't see Malcolm as a threat or an exception. He saw him as a man. The rest of the night passed like a blur. Photographers still asked for pictures. Guests still smiled, but everything felt different. The glitter of the evening had dulled. The conversations that followed were quieter, more hesitant, more honest. People no longer spoke about progress in the past tense. They began to question what it really looked like in the present. Days later, Malcolm's speech went viral. Clips of his words spread online, echoing through comment sections and news reports. Some praised his grace and courage. Others questioned whether it was really such a big deal. But those who had ever felt the sting of being doubted for simply existing, they knew exactly how much it mattered. Because what happened to Malcolm wasn't just one man's story. It was a mirror, a reflection of countless unseen moments in stores, offices, and neighborhoods across the world. Moments where worth was measured by color before character. Malcolm continued his work, but something had changed in him. The incident had stripped away the illusion that his success alone could protect him from bias. Yet it also gave him something stronger, clarity. He began to speak more openly about race and representation, using his platform not just to build structures, but to build understanding. He created scholarships for young architects of color, opened mentorship programs, and partnered with organizations to promote equity in his field. The pain of that night became the foundation for something larger, a reminder that change doesn't always begin in boardrooms or legislatures. Sometimes it starts with one moment of discomfort that forces the world to look inward. But even as his story inspired others, Malcolm never forgot how it began, with a single assumption. One look, one decision, one hand raised to stop him. That was all it took to turn celebration into humiliation. He often wondered how many more times similar moments were happening quietly, unseen, unrecorded. How many people were turned away, dismissed, or doubted because of the way they looked before anyone asked who they were. He knew the answer, far too many, and so, each time he spoke publicly, he ended with a challenge. He asked his audience, not for sympathy, but for awareness. Every time you walk past someone, every time you judge who belongs and who doesn't, he would say, ask yourself, what story are you writing in your mind about them? And what would happen if you were wrong? The question lingered long after the applause ended. The night of the gala became more than a mistake. It became a movement, a reminder that racism isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it's polite, silent, and hidden behind good intentions. And it thrives not because of hatred, but because of the comfort of indifference. Malcolm's story reminds us that no title, degree, or recognition can shield someone from prejudice, but awareness can dismantle it, one moment at a time. He never wanted to be remembered as the man stopped by a guard. He wanted to be remembered as the man who made people stop and think, because the real question isn't what happened that night. The real question is what we'll do the next time it does. So now, as you watch this, ask yourself, when you see someone being questioned, overlooked, or doubted for no reason at all, will you stay silent? Or will you be the one who finally steps forward and says, "This isn't right"?